Okay, thanks, Cindy. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you on this Friday as the energies are starting to clear soon in the cosmos. My name is Betsy. If you haven't met me before, I am a human design specialist and a quantum alignment system practitioner. I am also a member of Karen's team. So if you are one of our professional students or if you've certified with Karen, you probably know me on that side as well. I'm really excited to be here with you today to talk about this topic because it's something that I've been talking to people a lot about lately, which is how do you take the kind of themes and concepts that you might find in your chart and actually live them in your life? And that can feel a little abstract and hard to measure sometimes. So I wanted to talk to you about that today a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation here. Okay. So let's talk about how we live according to our human design today. So you've heard us say a lot that human design is a system of cross-cultural archetypes. So what does that mean? Archetypes are typical examples of a certain person or thing, or they can be recurrent symbols or motifs in literature, art, or mythology. So essentially, they're examples, they're symbols, they're metaphors, right? So how do we actually apply these practically in our lives? It can sometimes be hard to take those metaphorical ideas and say, okay, that's a cool concept, but then what do I do with that? So first of all, you've heard Karen say this many times, but people aren't formulas. So you're not going to be able to just plug in your birth information and pop up this chart and it's going to give you this very exact roadmap to exactly everything you're supposed to do in your life and how to succeed at it, right? It's symbols, it's energies, and it's how you work with those energies that's going to determine the course of your life itself. And you have choice, you have free will. Your chart is meant to give you direction and freedom, not to put you in another box. I know that sometimes people say, I feel like my chart is so restrictive. It's actually supposed to give you freedom. So I want to talk to you today about how we can find a little more of that. There really isn't one right way to live the energies in your chart. So finding how they work for you and how they work with your nature, with the flow of your particular purpose and your path is part of what you came here to learn. It's your soul curriculum. So I'll remind you again that you have choice and free will, and you ultimately get to decide to go this way or that, and to follow the flow of particular energies or not. You can live this any number of different ways in your life. So it's all about alignment. And the energies in your chart ultimately give you more of a key to how you can work with your life more gracefully and make decisions easier. And I love this quote by Anonymous. We don't know who said it, but you know the truth by the way it feels. So I want you to remember that because a lot of this is about learning what feels true and right for you as you align with your design. So let's talk a little bit about how we each actually live our design differently, because we all do. So one good example and one way that I really like to explore this is by looking at people's incarnation crosses. So your incarnation cross is determined by the top 4 numbers at the very top of your chart, your conscious and unconscious sun and your conscious and unconscious earth. And your incarnation cross is kind of a high level indicator of your purpose. So if your chart was like a story, your type is like the role that you're here to play. Your profile is kind of like your character, gives you an insight into learning style, what you need to feel supported, style of making decisions, things like that. And then your incarnation cross is kind of like the plot. Where does the story go? So incarnation crosses, a lot of people have the same incarnation cross, but that doesn't mean that they all have the exact same purpose. It just means that they're going to be working with similar energetic themes. So let's take a look at a couple of different crosses, okay? So the right angle cross of the vessel of love. I seem to attract people into my life with this cross, and this is the story of that cross that I wrote based on the energies. People with this incarnation cross really carry a deep love of humanity and a desire to help us collectively reach our greatest potential. They have the innate ability to realign patterns with a deeper sense of compassion, and they're designed to be an embodiment and a role model of self-love. These are people who understand that we're all connected, that we come from one source, and that this physical world and our physical bodies are a vehicle for the soul, the source that connects us. And when we live into our own love of self and connection to a higher purpose, these people are role models of service and compassion that light the way forward. So you can see here the top 4 numbers in a chart that make up the right angle cross of the vessel of love. And these can be in different configurations. So each of these gates could be in different placements, but if all 4 of these are in the top 4 numbers, that's going to be the cross that you were born with. So that's gates 15, 10, 25, and 46. 46 is all about embodiment. Gate 25 is all about the love of spirit. Gate 15 is about compassion, and gate 10 is about self-love. So you see those themes playing out in the story that we talked about here, yes? Okay, here are 3 people who all have the right angle cross of the vessel of love. Fred Rogers, better known to many as Mr. Rogers, Glennon Doyle, and Elizabeth Warren. So Mr. Rogers created a television show that was all about empowering children to work with their feelings, to love themselves, to know how to be grounded and centered human beings and to be cared for. You can see how he was living out the energies of this cross of compassion, of empowering, returning people to love, of connecting the spirits and the hearts with the embodiment on this planet. And he was doing that specifically with children. That was how he lived out his purpose. But we can see how Mr. Rogers very much lived out that right angle cross of the vessel of love through his children's show and his work with children. Glennon Doyle started out, she is an incredible author, one of my favorite authors. She's also an activist. She started a nonprofit called Together Rising that through mostly small donations connects with local groups with their boots on the ground to impact any number of different issues where people are being met with hardship. They have sent donations to organizations on the ground in Yemen where they're actually bringing food to people who are struggling with the famine that's occurring there. They've helped reunite families that have been separated at the border, any number of different things. And then additionally, they have actually sent checks to people who are just in a tough spot and need some help to get through the month, to pay their rent, to keep their lights on, to feed their kids. There are a lot of people who donate to her organization who then end up finding themselves in a hard spot and have received a gift back from the organization and have said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You know, I've been a regular donor, but I fell on hard times and now I got to receive from you. I'll be a donor again when I can. So you can see how in a very different way than Fred Rogers, she's very much living out this right angle cross of the vessel of love. And so it's cool to see how she's doing that in her own way through her writing and through her activism. Elizabeth Warren is a senator who was one of the Democratic nominees for president in this last election. She obviously did not get the nomination, but she's been in the Senate for a couple of terms now. And a lot of what she has fought for is about economic equality and supporting greater equity when it comes to policy that affects working people. A lot of people spoke about her on the campaign trail and throughout her career as being an incredibly compassionate person, that one of the qualities that they have mentioned they appreciate about her is her ability to listen and to meet people in a very loving way. She was known for giving pinky promises to little girls along the trail to help them know that they too could dream of becoming president one day and expanding their dreams. So as you can see, each of these different people is very much living out the energies of wanting to make this world a better place, of reconnecting us to our hearts and souls, of living from compassion, of reconnecting us with our self-love, and of lifting others up. But they're all doing it in very different ways. So the themes of the energies of their charts are the same, but how they each were called to be of service in their lives was very different. So again, we can have the similar or same energies in our charts and live them out differently. Here's another personal example. This is me over here. I have the same incarnation cross as Lizzo and Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson and I actually have the same birthday, which I just discovered when creating this presentation, which is an honor for me. I thought that was pretty cool. And so the writing across the 4 ways, I realized I didn't do a write-up here, but what it's essentially about is returning people to a new, more empowering narrative about who they are, about turning our personal life lessons and struggles into awareness and into fruit that we then use to uplift others, to help them not settle for less, to help them become more empowered. And so for me personally, I enjoy living out the energies of my chart through this vehicle, through human design, through working with clients, through the quantum alignment system, through helping people literally rewrite the meanings that they hold about the truth of who they are. This is the at least current vehicle that I'm working with. Interestingly, both of these other two are musicians, but in very different ways. You know, Willie Nelson's also an activist, an author. He's been a huge advocate for environmental rights, and he's lived through a lot of hard times. And he's taken that and turned that into activism through his music. Lizzo has been a huge voice for body positivity and for loving yourself. Self-love is a huge part of her music and her lyrics. And she's been an incredible beacon for people to understand that they can take the ways that they've been shamed or hurt or told they can't and turn it around into fuel. And by living more fully as yourself, by loving yourself fully, you inspire others to do the same. And so she hasn't settled, and she's just skyrocketed in the last couple of years, and her music is incredibly empowering. So each of the three of us, through very different vehicles, are living out the energies of our Incarnation Cross in different ways to support people in writing new narratives that are empowering and turning our pain into purpose in very different ways. So I hope this is giving you a little bit of an illustration about how this can kind of work and how we're essentially looking at energetic themes that can play out in any number of different ways. So the chart is just not prescriptive. It doesn't mean you're going to live out your story in one particular way. The same is true for every part of the chart, right? For your type, your profile, your centers, every aspect. Nothing in your chart is necessarily limiting for you. It just gives you guiding direction for how you can find the course that suits you best and is the most fulfilling. Another good example is twins. I've actually been asked about this a lot because twins are born very close together, some only a minute or less apart. And so on the surface, especially with the software we use to run charts now, it looks like they have the exact same chart. Now, I will say that I was taught that if we were able to calculate the time of birth down to the second using an atomic clock, there would still be nuances in the chart that would be potentially different. However, you know, I've had parents of twins come to me and say, you know, oh, this is a sham. You know, human design is supposed to give us each a unique thumbprint that's only ours and no one else's. And but I have twins, their chart's the same. You know, they're not the same person. How do you explain this? Well, just because they have the same chart doesn't mean they're going to live identical lives. They each have their own unique soul. They each have their own unique preferences and personalities and outlooks, and they're going to live out those themes very differently. So you often see that twins don't always have the same trajectory in life, but they may live out their lives thematically kind of similarly in terms of their energy, but they might still choose different paths, right? So that's an important example and thing to know. If you are a twin or if you're a parent of a twin, you know, you are not the same as your twin. Your children, your twin children are not the same. They are unique individuals and they have choice in terms of how they live out the energies of their chart. So I encourage you actually to take a look at your chart and some of the energies there and start playing with this, because I can pretty much guarantee you that you're already living more in alignment than you might think. So when you're looking at the energetic themes of your design, for example, you know, my chart and my Incarnation Cross, as I mentioned, has a lot of storytelling energy in it, right? And a lot about rewriting new narratives. Well, I'm not a novelist, so it could be very easy on the surface to say, oh, you're supposed to be a writer. But it's not that prescriptive. When I look at my chart, I tell stories all the time with my clients, supporting them in looking at the story they're telling themselves of who they are. Is it aligned? Is it not? Is it fulfilling you? Is it not? You know, where can you rewrite certain aspects of the meanings you're holding so that you can feel more empowered and alive with the authentic truth of who you are? I'm a storyteller in terms of helping people return home to themselves, right? Storytellers can be writers, they can be teachers, they can be politicians, they can be, right? All the ways in which we can use language, in which we can use narrative in life are vast. And And so if I thought to myself, oh, I only can be a writer because I have storytelling in my chart. No, there's so many possibilities. And I often find this too, for example, when people are being interviewed for jobs, right? For example, I actually started out in the theater. And then from the theater, I ended up getting a job in market research. And on the surface, those two things seem very dissimilar, right? How do you go from performing on a stage to interviewing people for, products and all of that? Well, it was listening to people tell their stories. It was finding the through line. It was finding the one unifying story that could help the people I was working with create a narrative around what they needed to know so that they could best serve their audience and their community, right? So I think that a lot of what people often, it's a practice for people in job interviews to say, how do the skills that you possess and the things that you're passionate about translate to the job you're applying for? And on the surface, they might seem very disparate, but they aren't necessarily. So I encourage you to kind of play a game with yourself doing that with your own chart. Look at the energies there. Where are some of your innate gifts and talents? Where are some of the energies that live in your design? How are you living your life now where you're already living it? And you might find that you're not as out of alignment as you think you are. So I encourage you to do that kind of an exercise. It can be really fun, and it can also open up the world of possibility as you see it. Your design is not meant to limit you. I've probably said this 5 times already. But it doesn't determine what you can or can't do or what you can or can't be. Some people have come to me over the years and said, God, I feel doomed by these aspects of my design, right? But recognizing how these energies are designed to function can actually be really liberating. So for example, I've had a lot of projector clients say that they feel doomed by their strategy of needing to wait for an invitation. Oh my God, I'm going to end up sitting around forever waiting and no one's ever going to recognize me. And this is terrible, right? Well, here are 3 of our most famous presidents who were all projectors. And they were leaders of one of the most powerful nations in the world. I was recently told Barack Obama actually is a 4/6 projector, and he actually became president while he was still on the roof, which you're not supposed to be able to do. But if I was listening to, Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and listening to the process as she told it of how he moved through each leg of his political career, and he had people inviting him to run for office at every step of the journey, right? He was very much in alignment with his energies. He knew what he wanted, and he was, invited into serving in that role. So there's nothing in a projector's chart or design that says you can't be a leader, that says you can't live into really any role that you might want in life, as long as you're following the aligned energies of your design. Same for people with the channel 2838, which I happen to have in my chart, which in traditional human design is called the channel of struggle, but is the energy of adventure in quantum human design. And a lot of people with this channel feel really doomed to struggle their whole life, doomed to just live a hard life, that everything's going to be hard for me, nothing's going to work out. Well, Brad Pitt has a channel of struggle in his chart. Martin Luther King Jr. has a channel of struggle in his chart. Admittedly, both of these people have endured great challenges in very, very different ways. Just to be clear, I'm not comparing the struggles of Martin Luther King Jr. with Brad Pitt. I am just going to show that each of them made a great impact in the area in which they were seeking. And so you're not doomed to be unsuccessful or to be a failure if you have the channel of struggle in your chart, right? And you can play this game with really any energy in the human design chart. I know that a lot of times people with the 5th line energy feel like they're doomed never to be seen. No one's ever going to see the truth of who I am. I know so many 5th lines who are living very authentically, with very authentic relationships, who are very successful and have been recognized for their gifts and talents. Doesn't mean they're not met with projection, right? But they learn to navigate it. As I was looking up the design of different presidents and different successful people, literally every single aspect of any part of the chart you could imagine has been embodied by people who've lived very successful lives in the field in which that they were seeking. And so, it's all about how you live it, and it's all about how you align with it and how you persevere through and work with the energies. So just a couple of notes for you. You have choice. For me, when I learned my design, and it's part of what led me to get certified and to do this for other people, I was so relieved to learn about some of the energies in my chart, to realize, oh my gosh, I didn't do anything wrong, or oh, this explains why I've experienced some of these life lessons the way that I have, right? But just because my design explains some of that to me doesn't mean that I have to keep repeating it the same way. Like I said, it doesn't mean I'm doomed to keep repeating over and over the same struggles or challenges. It means now I get to choose because I understand, right? And because I understand that my challenges are also my blessings in my chart. Remember, there's a high and a low expression to everything. One of my favorite examples of this is the gate 10 in the chart, which was part of the right angle cross of the vessel of love, where we started our conversation today. And this is the energy of self-love in the chart. It's a very empowering energy, and it's meant to return people to their innate sense of love of self. On the low expression of that energy can turn to victimhood and blaming. It can be the opposite of self-love, right? And so I often remind people with this energy that if you're ever sitting in that lower vibration of that energy in your chart, if you're feeling like a victim, if you're feeling like you're blaming others, if you're feeling a distinct lack of self-love, to remember that it's actually just the flip side of a very empowering energy in your chart. And to see what you can do to move yourself back into that direction instead of staying in that kind of spiral of the victimhood, of the blaming. There's two sides to everything. So for me, I've come to really love the channel of struggle in my chart, because through my challenges, I've grown into the person that I am now. I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't endured the challenges that I've lived through. I wouldn't be as compassionate a person. I wouldn't be as awakened a person as I am now. And I don't know that I would necessarily have as much of a desire to fight on behalf of helping other people, because I myself know what it's like to have been through the fire. And so I want to help other people to move through their challenges and their times of awakening, because I know what it was like to not have had that support when I went through it. So I've come to really love it. And sometimes I have to do my own reframing, right, around when I come up against that energy in my life. But it's all an understanding that they both coexist. A lot of times in the chart, things really just come back to type and strategy. And I think that some people get annoyed about this because they're like, I just want to know about this gate and this energy and give me all the little details, right? And the truth is that if you're living in alignment with your strategy according to type, so much of the rest of your design is just going to fall into place. And so I always like to bring us back to this key foundational piece. So manifestors in traditional human design, initiators in quantum human design, strategy is to inform. So initiators have this incredible internal creative flow. They really have this almost direct connection to the divine, that divine creative inspiration. When that flow gets interrupted, initiators can experience anger. You're interrupting me, I'm in a flow, right? It can be, it's very maddening. So the strategy of informing helps you have to deal less with these interruptions. Hey, I'm doing this thing, give me some space right now. Or potentially backlash for if you're just in your flow and you follow a thing and it impacts people around you. Telling them ahead of time can help them kind of come into your flow with you instead of needing to deal with it afterwards, right? So let's talk about some practical examples of living this way. I know some initiators where it's really helps them to create a space, an office, just a room, even just going to a coffee shop, wherever, where they can go and just be uninterrupted. Even hanging a sign on the door, genius at work, don't disturb, right? I'm in my creative flow. I'll come out when I'm done, right? As much as you can tell people to just leave you be and not interrupt your flow. If you have an inspiration, this is a silly example, but like, let's say you have an inspiration, to go, oh, I got this great business idea. I got to go buy 100 hand-dipped soy wax candles, and you charge it to your credit card. And then your spouse goes out to the grocery store and the card's maxed out and they can't buy food for dinner. And they're, why did you do that? If you had informed your partner ahead of time, hey, honey, I'm buying these candles. I'm going to put it on this card. We'll figure it out later. Maybe they could bring cash to the store or use a different card or something like that. So that's where the informing piece comes in, right? It's like, oh God, I got this inspiration. Pause for just 1 second. Inform the people who it's going to impact and it will help things flow much easier for you later. I recently had a client where they were feeling very undervalued in their job, and I could just tell that their creative flow was just being so impeded, and no wonder they felt stifled and like they weren't in the right place. So you can feel when your creative flow is free and able to make the impact that it wants, right? So a lot of times that can be a good indicator for you of if you're in the right career, if you're in the right job, if you're in the right location. You know, are people honoring your creative flow, and are they listening to your viewpoint, right? Try creating a backup plan for when suddenly that creative flow hits. I know that sometimes initiator mamas struggle. It's like you're taking care of the kids and then your creative flow hits and it's like, oh God, I can't just like drop the baby and go, right? Well, what if you could? What if you had someone else that you could hand the baby off to in a split second if you needed to go and like get into your flow? Or what if there was a particular toy or particular activity that the child enjoyed that you could get them active in? So having some backup plans for when that creativity starts flowing for you can sometimes help. And then a lot of times for initiators, really reconnecting to remembering what that flow even feels like can be helpful. Manifestors as children sometimes are actually made to feel really disempowered because people don't know what to do with the amount of power that they have as children. And so their voices aren't always listened to, their creativity isn't always honored. And so sometimes it's also a process for initiators of just coming back into relationship with your own creativity. You know, when you really feel like you're in the flow, what does it feel like? And start really making note of that in your life so that you can feel when you're on it, and you can feel what it's like when that divine timing is on. You can feel, I've got the idea, this is the right timing to act on it, and start putting those pieces together can really help manifestors, initiators, and aligning with their strategy. For generators in traditional human design, alchemists in quantum human design, your strategy is to respond. So generators or alchemists are meant to wait for something to show up in their external environment to respond to before acting, but we're not taught to do this. We're taught to just go out and make things happen. So it can feel really strange to wait. And it can even feel like if I sit around and wait, nothing's going to happen. But ultimately, this leads to much greater alignment and success for you in your life. And a lot of times while you're waiting, or if things aren't working out, that emotional theme can be frustration. And sometimes that frustration is just an indicator for you that the next level is coming, and to be aware and awake to the stimuli that are showing up for you in your external environment for that next big opportunity. Or sometimes it can just be that you've outgrown where you are right now and you're ready for the next thing. Or honestly, if you haven't been responding and if you've been pushing to try to make things happen without any signals from the universe that it's time and they're not working out the way that you want, that can be extremely frustrating. So living according to strategy, hone your awareness as far as responding. I tell when alchemists come to me for a session, I remind people that there are signs around us all the time. There's things for us to respond to around us all the time. So start actually consciously practicing living in response. Start with something small, right? Whether you're like, oh man, okay, where should I eat lunch today, right? Oh, you see a sign for McDonald's. That doesn't feel good. You see a sign for, I don't know, Panera. Oh, that feels good. Yeah, sandwich sounds good, right? So just practice with little things. And then if you start having bigger questions where I'm like, okay, you know, I want to go on this vacation. I want to go on a vacation, but I don't know where. Start paying attention to when signs show up. Maybe you get an email in your inbox advertising discounts on flights to certain locations. Maybe a friend calls you up and says, hey man, I gotta get out of town. You know, you want to come with me? I'm thinking of going to Aruba. Oh, that feels good, right? So start small, but just start practicing your skill of paying attention, because the more that we're paying attention and we have awareness to what's around us, the more we realize that we're actually living in response all the time. We just might not be doing it consciously. Also practice feeling into what your response feels like. So sometimes, you know, we'll have an idea and we'll say, okay, universe, I want to do this thing. Show me, you know, what's the next right step, or who's the right person to do it with? And then we'll wait for that stimulus to show up in our environment of someone calls and invites us, or this person mentions this person's name. Oh, they're the right person, right? sometimes you'll get something to respond to completely out of the blue. Someone just calls you up and they're like, hey, you know, have you ever thought about teaching this class? Right? Oh, okay. That's something new I hadn't thought of. I never thought of teaching before, but let me see. How does it make you feel? I've often found I'm a generator alchemist. So for me, as I've practiced working with my sacral response, I can actually feel it in my body when it's a yes or a no a lot of the time. If it really juices me up and gets me excited and, you know, just like that warm fuzzy feeling, oh yeah, that's my sacral lighting up, right? If I have, oh, that makes me contract and I don't know about that, you know, that's either a sacral no or possibly some fear I need to move through. But practice responding and feeling what your response feels like in your body. And remember that you don't have to say yes to everything. The whole point of responding is that it's a yes or a no, right? So not every opportunity that comes along is one you have to say yes to. A lot of times generators we can get really stuck in our stories and agonizing over making the right decision, right? Have someone ask you some yes or no questions. Tune into your gut response, your uh-huh or your right? This can be just really, really helpful. I sometimes ask my husband, I coach my husband to ask me questions. I'm like, hey, I'm all up in my head. Can you just ask me these 3 questions? I tell him exactly what to ask me, the yes or no questions, and he'll do it and I can respond. And that just helps me hear my own response outside of myself. And then practice using those nonverbal sacral sounds all the time. A lot of times we're conditioned out of using these sacral sounds. If you pay attention to generator children, they do it a lot. I have 2 generator children, especially my youngest. She responds to pretty much every yes or no question that I ask her. It's just instinctive. So practice. People will ask you yes or no questions all the time. And it doesn't actually sound as weird in daily conversation as you might think. Hey, do you want to go for lunch? Right? So practice responding with your sacral sounds when you get yes or no questions just in the day-to-day of your life, and you'll find that you're actually activating your sacral constantly throughout your life, and it will help you know where to make decisions from. Manifesting generators or time benders are primarily generator types, so their strategy is to respond, but they also have the motor to the throat, so they have that manifesting energy, which means that their strategy is to respond, hold the vision, and inform. And they can feel both the anger and the frustration. So time benders are really designed to move faster than most people and find the most efficient way to do things. But it can be especially hard for time benders to slow down long enough for that response to kick in rather than just jumping into action. Because again, they have that manifested energy. They're like, oh, I got this idea. I want to just go out and do it, right? But that response is key to your alignment and your flow. So I often tell, usually time benders, manifesting generators already have lots of things happening at once. They've got lots of projects, lots of plates they're spinning. Make sure that everything you're doing, you at least enjoy it. Yeah. They don't all have to be income driven. Maybe you have 5 different hobbies. Maybe, you know, you're working a job and also building a business. You are designed to be doing multiple things at once. And it just helps you to keep your energy flowing. And also it opens you up to the possibility of those stimuli to come in for you to respond to know what's correct for you to do. When that excitement hits, practice the pause, journal about it, meditate on it, have a trusted friend ask you questions to tune into that gut response. But wait to respond before taking action. And a lot of what can be really helpful for manifesting generators or time benders is channeling your energy into something that lays the foundation for whatever your idea is while you're waiting for that response. So you have an idea to start a new business, awesome. Channel your energy into building the website, right? Or designing the business cards. Or you have the energy to, you know, start a band, awesome. Start writing your songs, right? Start composing the music. Find something that you can put all that manifesting generator energy into that keeps you flowing and not stagnated while you're waiting for the stimulus to show up to show you, okay, right place, right time, right people, let's go, right? I often recommend that you keep a vision board and keep it prominently in a visible place in your home. I know some manifesting generators who like to take Post-it notes and like keep all their ideas up on their wall or keep an idea book. But again, with the holding of the vision, you know, as you're holding it, as you wait for that, and just to be clear, you might have an idea and the thing to respond to shows up right then, or you might be responding to something already and then you can just go. So I'm not saying that there's always waiting involved, because there's not necessarily. But having a vision board also helps you to keep your energy flowing as new ideas and new things you want to do come and flow in. Also, trust your instincts on how you feel you should do something. Sometimes people want to try to slow manifesting generators down. Oh, just pick one thing. Or, oh, but you're already doing those 4 things. Can't you put that on hold? Or why are you, but you're supposed to be finding the most efficient way to do things. You're designed to skip steps. So trust your instincts. Sometimes people might end up coming back to you and be like, wow, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. You just saved me, XYZ amount of time. Remember to inform your people also, just like the manifestors or initiators, when you get on a creative role, so that you can get your uninterrupted focus time. And then stay active. It's really good for both generators and manifesting generators to use that sacral energy up by the end of the day. Whatever activity feels good to you. Are you a runner, a swimmer? Do you like to dance? Just something to keep your body physically active is good. Projectors in traditional human design, orchestrators in quantum human design are designed to wait for an invitation. Projectors carry an immense amount of wisdom and they can see the bigger picture, but they need to wait for an invitation to share what they know. And this can be really difficult. But a lot of times not being recognized can lead to that emotional theme of bitterness of, oh man, I see, I know a lot of projectors or orchestrators who've been incredibly frustrated over recent history, looking around and being like, guys, humanity, we can go this way. Why are you doing this? What you're doing? Come on. But the more that you actually do wait for that recognition, cultivate your own sense of value, knowing your wisdom, the more that you're going to align with your true sense of value, attract the people who really value you, and also not deplete your energy. So for projectors, similar to what I said for manifesting generators, but in a different way, laying the foundation for what you see while you wait for the invitation can be really helpful. And it also helps keep you in alignment with the energy of whatever it is you're driven to create. So again, building a website, ordering your business cards. If you're called to write a book, start writing your manuscript, right? And then when you're invited to share it, hey, do you have a blog? Oh, that's a good place for me to put my stuff in the world. Great. Yeah, I'll totally share it if you have a blog, right? Waiting for that invitation to come. Cultivating consistent practices that honor your energy. So projectors need more rest than generator types. Same with manifestors, same with reflectors. And so building in those cycles of rest and restoration is really important. And I actually have a number of friends who are projectors who are entrepreneurial, where they've just created their own schedule in a way that's very different. I have a couple projector friends who've dated generator types, where the generator's, up at 7 and working, just like ready to go. And the projector, sleeps in, wakes up slowly, has their tea, meditates. They don't start work until like noon, right? But it's because they know they need that energetic alignment in the morning. They need that rest and restoration to have the energy to really be of service. That's just an example. Not every energy is designed to work that way. But, cultivating cycles of rest and life structures that allow you to honor your energy. Practice asking if it's okay to share before speaking. I know a number of projectors that this works really well for, because sometimes, if you just offer your wisdom uninvited, people are like, I didn't ask you why, excuse me, who are you? Whereas if you say, oh my gosh, I have an insight, is it okay if I share it with you? Sometimes people will actually say no. They'll say, no, not right now, or I'm not interested, right? And then you're like, okay, great, this is not my audience. You don't want to share your insight with that person. They're not going to hear you. And in fact, you might even get pushback. Whereas if someone says, oh yeah, sure, I'd love to hear it, right? Then they've kind of just invited you in to speak, and you're much more likely to be heard. Cultivating relationships that honor you. I have some projector friends that have a regular practice that honors their strategy of, evaluating their relationships every year, who honors them and who doesn't. Your energy is precious, right? And so the people who honor and see your wisdom, and maybe this is just a human practice, maybe all of us should do this, who aligns with my design and who doesn't, but I find that for projectors especially, it's a good idea. Practice saying no to invitations that don't feel right. Sometimes projectors, while they're waiting for invitations, can feel like as soon as an invitation comes, they have to grab it because they don't know when the next one's coming, right? But the truth is, you feel when an invitation is correct or not. And the more that you say yes to the correct ones and no to the ones that don't feel right, the more you're going to actually get yourself into an aligned situation that feels really good. And then practice good energy hygiene also. Projectors really carry the energy template for the planet, and it's a lot of energy right now. So I recommend good energy hygiene. I also recommend, I didn't write this one down, but I often recommend for projectors, if you're struggling with figuring out how those invitations show up in your daily life, is actually tracking them. Think about a time when something worked out really well for you, like it just felt easy, right? Oh my God, that just happened so seamlessly. And track back in your mind, somewhere in there, there was most certainly a moment where you were invited into something. And it might not have been into where you ended up, but it was the initial invitation that got you started along your path. So the same way that I recommend for generators to practice paying attention to where those stimuli come for you to respond to, I recommend for projectors to start paying attention to where invitations are coming into your life, because you might find you're actually being invited more than you think you are. So I often recommend that tracking of the invitations to see, what do they feel like? How do I know when I'm getting an invitation? Sometimes it's not always, I invite you to come to my party on Saturday, February 2nd, right? It's not always like that, literally getting an invitation in the mail. So, and then our reflectors in traditional human design, or calibrators in quantum human design, with the strategy of waiting a lunar cycle. So calibrators are really designed to work with time differently than everyone else. And our society isn't set up to honor this really. So it can lead for disappointment if you're kind of rushed into making decisions. Similar to the way that projectors feel a lot of the energy template, reflectors even more so, with all of your openness, you really feel the energy around you. So sometimes there can also be a disappointment in how humanity is showing up, how others are showing up. But the more that you can find ways to honor your own unique rhythms, the more aligned you're going to feel. So creating a strategy to manage your need for more time to make a decision can help. I know some people where they literally create this like backdoor language when like with a job offer, or someone asking them to do something, they'll say, oh yeah, you know, can I take some time to consider that? Or, you know, they create some language that literally buys you time. Or even having a backup plan. Okay, well, if I'm rushed into this, or it doesn't feel right, or I can't decide in time, you know, then what? And I even know some people who have had to rush into a decision, because sometimes in the world, the way that it is, it's like, okay, give me a no within or a yes or no within 72 hours, or we're moving on, right? Especially with jobs. It's like, you need to accept or not, we're moving on to the next candidate. And sometimes you do need to just go with your best decision in the moment, and then trust that you can adjust later if needed. You know, can you say yes now? And then if it turns out to not feel correct, can you change your mind? Can you say, actually, you know what, I'm pulling out? Or can you say no and then say, actually, you know what, I decided I do want that. Is it still available, right? But again, because a lot of times decisions take longer, reflectors are very connected to the movement of the moon, and their energy changes each day of the lunar cycle. So they need to kind of ride out that entire lunar cycle to really get clarity about how they feel about a decision. So building energetic release practices into your daily life. Go for walks, take baths, journal, meditate, whatever it is for you. But as a calibrator, reflector, you're picking up on lots of energy around you all the time. Any way that you can, even just a hot shower, you know, water is very cleansing. Alone time, whatever it is that you need to clear and manage your energy will be really important for you to also keep your alignment and keep clear. I often recommend for reflectors to track how they feel on each day of the lunar cycle. So you're going to have a little bit of consistency in the patterns of your energy based on the cycles of the moon. And there are some people who actually do lunar charts and do lunar readings for calibrators, if that's something you're interested in. But tracking your energy, especially around specific decisions, is there a moment when you really feel clear about what you want to do? What did that feel like? And I'm recommending this kind of tracking aspect for all the types, but I think that sometimes when we're looking at our strategy in a practical way, people are like, I don't know what this feels like in day-to-day living, right? Okay, it really helps to write it down, to track it, to say, okay, when I felt really clear, this is what was happening, right? And then start tracking that feeling throughout your life. And then for reflectors or calibrators, right place and right people are really important because you're so attuned to the energies around you. So if the energy feels misaligned, part of you living according to your strategy also is giving yourself the freedom to make a shift if you're around people that feel toxic, places that feel toxic, to allow you to align the best you can with your clarity, to allow you to feel your unique energy, because you're going to be feeling other people so much. I want to also emphasize that not everything lives in the chart. Sometimes we'll get questions of like, I'm in this and this circumstance, or I feel this and this away. What do I do? It's like, well, you know, that's not necessarily indicated in your chart, right? These are symbols, these are energetic metaphors and examples. So lived experience really matters. The chart isn't going to predict what kind of family you're born into. It's not going to predict, you know, the life circumstances that you're going to grow up in. It's not going to predict if you're going to grow up in poverty or in wealth. If you're going to grow up enduring, you know, racism or homophobia or, you know, or socioeconomic challenges, income disparities, racial disparities, any equity disparity. There are, you know, systemic issues in our world that exist that do actually make it harder for people to live certain experiences. And so I want to just make it clear that, you know, that is not in the chart, right? We don't see color in the chart. We don't see economic status in the chart. We don't see any of that in the chart, right? And that can influence both the choices we make, the opportunities we do or don't have access to, our outlook on life, all of that, right? So our lived experience does matter. And then of course it's how we live our life within the constructs of that, and the chart can give us support in doing so. Conditioning also matters. So you're going to be born into a family with its own generational patterns, where everyone in your biological family has their own design, where you're going to be taking in energies and amplifying them, or things like that. And so deconditioning really is a necessary step for us to live our design to the fullest, right? This is one of the reasons that I've been so passionate about the quantum alignment system, because through integrating energy psychology and EFT tapping into our work with human design, we can actually support people in accelerating that process of the deconditioning of the meanings we hold or the beliefs or some of the energies we maybe have identified with that aren't actually ours. It's really supportive in that way. So working with our conditioning also matters and isn't going to show up in your specific chart, right? Our outlook matters. Remember, there's high and low expressions of every energy in the chart. So which do you lean towards? Science has also shown that our viewpoint on the world around us influences our experience of it. I, read a scientific study of twins who lived very different lives as they got older. One of the twins had an outlook on life that things were really hard and they were unsupportive, whereas the other had a very positive outlook on life. And the twin that had a more negative outlook endured many more medical challenges, health challenges, actually had illnesses that her twin did not. And when the twin that was enduring the illnesses started working, with EFT, I believe they were actually able to move some of that through. But your lived experience can actually be influenced by your outlook. Now, again, not to spiritually bypass or say, you can just manifest, whatever. Our lived experience does matter. And there are lived factors that influence that. But our outlook does make a difference in terms of what we experience in our life as well, and whether we lean towards those high or low expressions of our design. And ultimately, our choices matter, right? So we saw this with the different incarnation crosses. You can have the same energies as someone else and choose completely different life paths that are both in alignment with the energies of your chart. But it's really your choice. I like to think of those books that I used to read as a kid where you got to choose your own ending, where you'd read a chapter and then it would give you 3 different choices. And with each choice, you would jump to a different page and then the story would go in a totally different direction, right? So you might be on a life path and have, at any given point, you come to these forks in the road. What are you going to choose? And a lot of the time, the energies in your chart can help you, you know, for generators, responding, for projectors, waiting for that invitation, for reflectors, you know, waiting the lunar cycle to really feel what feels right for you, for manifestors, aligning with that creative flow that's going to guide you in the right direction, right? So there's guiding signposts in your energy, right? And in your chart, but ultimately you do choose, and the energies can help you potentially navigate those choices with greater ease. Ultimately, your design is meant to give you freedom and really bring you home to yourself. And that's why I love it. And it's why I love helping people see, when I look at charts with people, of, okay, here's the energies we're looking at. How does this apply to you? How does this apply to your life? What are your questions in terms of what you yourself are dealing with or working with or asking yourself in your life? And how can I support you in living into it the most fully? So that's what I love to do with human design. So, all right, that's what I had for today. I don't even know where we're at with time. Oh, not bad. That was pretty good.
You did very, very good. And people, we have lots of comments, and there's some questions.
Okay.
One of the first ones that came up, Carol asked, is there somewhere to look up the stories of all the Incarnation Crosses that you recommend?
That's such a good question. So there are books. Okay. There are a couple of books out there that have been written about the Incarnation Crosses. I will say the only one or two that I've ever read, I wouldn't personally recommend. Like, when I read my, found it very depressing. And so I know that a friend of mine recently told me about, there's like a human design card deck that it uses the traditional human design language, not the quantum human design language. Karen has developed her own quantum human design cards, but they don't have the Incarnation Crosses in them. We're actually trying to get Karen to talk more about the Incarnation Crosses. I don't know if she will, but there's a different human design deck that I know has information about the Incarnation Crosses in them. For me, when I do a reading or work with someone, I kind of custom write the stories of the Incarnation Crosses for people based on the configuration, as you see that I did with the right angle cross of the vessel of love there. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're like, hey, you know, I think I did a special once recently, a while back, where I was like, hey, do you want to just have your like 2 or 3 sentence snippet of what your Incarnation Cross says about you, the way that I did with the right angle cross of the vessel of love. And I think I invited people to send me their chart or their birth information to run their chart. And I just wrote that story, that short story for you for like an $11 donation or something. If that's something you're interested in, I'm totally happy to do that for anyone who would like it. Just a super fun little snapshot of what your Incarnation Cross says about you and the energies of your purpose. So you can email me. Here, I'll put my email in the chat. And you can email me if that's something that you are interested in, of having me kind of write the little story of your Incarnation Cross. I'm happy to do that for you.
The next question that came up was on Zoom. What's the difference between getting a ping and initiating? It's an emotional generator, and I'm so conditioned to use my brain mind and to take action. It's challenging me to wait to respond and hear my emotions.
I totally hear you on that. I am not emotionally defined, but I am a generator, and I still struggle with, you know, getting out of my head and not initiating. And I've been working with this for a few years now, but you know, and having the emotional definition is an additional piece, because if you're emotionally defined, then you have an additional piece of waiting for clarity, of wanting to make sure that as you ride that emotional wave, that your response stays the same from when you're feeling high and good on your wave and when you're feeling low on your wave. So that you don't end up with like buyer's remorse afterwards. You know, if you get super feeling great, you're like, yes, I feel a yes. And then you're not feeling great a few days later and you're like, oh man, I don't have energy for this any longer. Why did I say yes to that? Right. So I think that a lot of it with that emotional definition is giving yourself a little bit more time. And I know that sometimes that is the piece that is the hardest. And that's where I often tell people, I'm like, is there any way that you can channel your energy into some activity? Honestly, also, do you have someone who can ask you yes or no questions? Because sometimes that in itself is just super clarifying of, having someone say, okay, is this the right decision for you? Uh-huh. Is now the right time? Uh-uh. Is it going to be the right time in a week? Uh-uh. Is it going to be the right time in a month? Uh-huh. Okay, let's check back in a month, right? Like getting in touch with those sacral sounds and that sacral response, because there's the responding to things that show up. Like sometimes it's really clear an opportunity shows up in your life and you just feel amazing about it. You're like, yes, so this is such a clear sacral yes. I'm just lit up about this, right? And sometimes it's not as clear. Or maybe it's a yes, but you don't have the energy for that opportunity right now. And it just feels really, depleting. Okay, well, maybe it's actually the correct opportunity, but not the right time. And you need to wait a little bit until you have the energy to actually follow through. So I don't know if that helps, but sometimes having someone ask you questions can at least quiet the mind a little bit, because then you have very concrete answers for how your sacral is responding to those circumstances around you.
Again, on Zoom, Stacy says, what would be the difference between responding to something and an invitation, generator versus projector? Wouldn't they both show up in your outside world?
They do. And so for generators, something you're responding to doesn't necessarily have to be someone coming to you and saying, hey, you should do this, right? You could be, like I said, you could get an email in your inbox that inspires you. You could, just be paying attention and overhear in conversation, maybe in the course of a week, like 5 different people mention the same thing. Or you pass a billboard on the side of the road, or, something like that. You can have all these little extra, like little, I like to call them breadcrumbs. It's like the universe is dropping breadcrumbs for you all the time. And sometimes they do look the same. Like generators can also be invited into things, right? And they can respond to that invitation. And Cindy, you can, chime in if you think I'm incorrect on this, but an invitation for a projector is typically much more person to person. It's actually receiving an invite from somebody. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. An invite, or they're being recognized that someone,
right?
The recognition is, to me, it feels more like, oh, yes, please share your wisdom with me.
Yes, exactly. Or would you be willing to come and do this over here? Or hey, I hear you're looking for a new place to live. I know this person, they're renting a place, right? Like that's an invitation.
Now, if I missed it, someone was asking, do you happen to know the name of the deck you were talking about that had the Incarnation Crosses?
Oh my gosh, I don't remember it. I'm so sorry, but I have a friend of mine received it as a gift, so that's how I know about it. So I can ask her and I can see if I can post it for you. And I will just say, I have not personally worked with this deck. She just told me it happened to have Incarnation Cross information in it. So that's the only reason I mentioned it. So I can't personally vouch for the deck.
It looks like Erin may be posting it in just a second.
Oh, thanks, Erin.
Going back, would combining your enneagram with your human design be of benefit to understand self and soul purpose?
So I think it really depends on you. So I will say, because when I started getting into human design, I have a lot of friends who work with a lot of different modalities. So I have friends who do Enneagram. I have friends who do multiple different types of astrology. And I ended up trading sessions with a lot of different people when I was first starting out, because I was really curious to see how they related to one another. And I definitely found similarities. I had, a shamanic astrology reading. I had an Enneagram done, and I'm always tracking and could see how there were similarities to what, Enneagram told me about myself and what my human design tells me. Same with astrology, right? So I think that all of these are just different esoteric systems, and they all, are helpful. I think they definitely overlap in some ways, and I think that they are unique in some ways, each of them, just in terms of how they talk about the nature of our human existence and our personalities and how we function in the world. So, you know, I definitely learned things from the astrology readings, from the Enneagram reading that I hadn't thought of in the context of my design. So, but I think for some people, it can be really overwhelming also if that's not in your nature to say, I want to know all the things and see how they kind of fit together or not. You know, some people are like, just give me one to help me make sense of it. Let me integrate it and I'm good, right? So I think it really depends on your personality and how you feel and what is supportive to you. But hey, I did it and I found it really interesting. So why not?
Just wanted to share that Erin shared the deck is for sale on Etsy, and it's actually Ceremonious, which is she actually did the incarnation class at the Human Design Conference. Brynja.
Yes, Brynja. Awesome.
And I will put the link is posted in the Zoom chat, and I'm posting it on your Facebook now.
Thank you. That's a wonderful connection.
And we are coming at the top of the hour. Did you want? I know you have something to share.
Oh, yes. So I've had a lot of people actually recently come to me and ask if I offer any additional supports around helping you live into your design. And I have found, I mean, this is something I just do naturally when I do readings with people. In the coming weeks, I am currently putting together a class that I'm going to be teaching that will support you in living more into your design. It's going to be a small group getting together to kind of look at some very specific aspects of your chart, and with support from me and support of the group, really figuring out, okay, how do I live into this in the context of what I'm personally working with in my life? How do I apply it? So that's one thing. The class is not quite, all the details are still coming together, but just wanted to let you all know that that's coming, and I'm going to be putting something out about it in Karen's newsletter. So if you're on Karen's email list, you'll get to hear about that. And there will be a limited number of seats. So if that's something you're interested in, then, you know, I would love to have you there. And then secondly, the other thing that I've been doing recently with people that I have found is super supportive is doing a series of 3 sessions with people, because I find that a lot of times what happens with people is they get their initial reading and then they have all of the intellectual understanding of, you know, those archetypes and what they mean for them. And then they'll come back to me, you know, a month or 2 later and say, okay, wait, I need you to help me with this specific thing or that specific thing. And so I've been finding that doing these 3-session bundles for people are really supportive to kind of mix and match, where, you know, we'll start with a reading and then we've got a couple more sessions to say, okay, we came up on the reading with, you know, some big questions about, you know, what are you wanting to do with your career moves? Or we hit on this really big piece of conditioning or pain that you grew up with from your family that's like really keeping you from living in your full alignment. Okay, let's do a quantum alignment session. Let's tap on that, right? So I wanted today, in light of this class, to offer a special discount for y'all. If you're interested in that, if you're like, I want to do more than just get one reading, I want to really live more into my design and I'd like a little extra support with that, I'm offering $111 off the package price for anyone watching this class. Cindy will be posting my scheduler and the code in the chat there for you. So if you just put the code in at the top of the page when you go to the scheduler, it'll automatically deduct that. And then if you scroll all the way to the bottom, that's where the packages are on the scheduling site. But ultimately, between the package discount and then this added discount, it's like a third off of my regular prices for any individual reading. So it's a great deal. And I've been loving doing them because I feel like I'm not, you know, just doing a reading and then sending people out to kind of figure it out. We get to really go more in depth and work through what you need, talk through the pieces of how to really apply it. And people have been telling me that it really helps them live more fully into their design in a way that's applicable and concrete and transformational and useful. So I wanted to just give you all a little discount on that package if that's something that you'd be interested in today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll do my best to go back and look and see if there's any additional questions that I might have missed. And thank you all for joining us today. It was a real pleasure to be here with you.